And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they stay there. Cause all I do is win, win, win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them stay there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second session of Higher Sales Winners, the ultimate webinar for data-driven leaders committed to hiring the best sales talent. I'm Shiran, and I'm the CEO and founder of Informed Decisions Interview Intelligence. Me and my team supporting me behind the scenes are very excited to have you here today with us to discuss the #1 sales success predictor. So before we dive in, let's do some quick networking. So if you can share with us on the chat where you're joining us from today. Last time we had participants from 4 different continents. Let's see if we can break that record today. So share with us. And as you're sharing, let me frame up the session for today. So as you already know, every sales mishire costs you a lot of money. Actually, it can cost you up to 300,000 in wasted salary, training, and loss of opportunities. And these expensive hiring mistakes can be significantly reduced by focusing on the most relevant and predictive skills, motivations, behaviors. And that's what we're diving into in the Higher Sales webinar series. And today we're going to talk about the most crucial predictor of sales success. At Informed Decisions, we believe in taking a very data-driven approach to sales hiring. And that's why we've turned into scientific research to understand what truly predicts sales success. And what we've found is something that most companies do not assess in their sales interviews. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, hey Drew from Denver joining us, and Christy from New York, and Lizette from San Francisco, and Blake and Chris. Hey everyone, so glad to have everyone here. Okay, so before we actually reveal that #1 sales predictor, there is a lot of wisdom in this virtual room that we want to utilize. So first of all, what I want to ask you, and let me also go ahead and share my screen, is what do you think, or what do you believe is the #1 sales predictor, the #1 predictor of sales success? So please share with us your assumption in the chat. And as you're typing, also let me quickly share that in our previous session, we focused on sales drive and how to identify genuine motivation during interviews. The reason why we started with sales drive is because we've asked over 1,000 sales leaders to look at their sales mishires and where did they came from. And they say we didn't recognize the sales hustle, the motivation. So if you're interested in watching that session, it's readily available on our website under the resources tab. Another thing that I'll say while you're sharing your #1 predictor is that we will also have 5 minutes at the end of this session for Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions throughout the entire session, and we'll answer as much as we can at the end. Okay, I can already see a few of your answers. Ability to overcome adversity, grit, let's see, qualify consistent sales effort, previous success, ambition. Okay, All very important. All very important. Still haven't touched the number one. Okay, so I'm waiting to see more responses. And as you're sharing, let me go a bit into the science behind what we're sharing here today. So what we're sharing here today is based on a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is an integration of a lot of research. Okay, it's 139 separate studies that were integrated across 4 decades of research. And the data is of 29,000 salespeople and also 5,000 managers inside and outside sales data. And the key goal was to analyze all of this data to find out what truly predicts sales success in B2B settings. So they've tested and they've looked at 31 different predictors of sales success, some of them related to the actual salespersons, other to the organization, other to the client's characteristics, other to the context and environment. And the way that they've measured success is in multiple ways. So they looked at sales performance, at customer satisfaction, relationship quality, achievement of quotas, and market share gains. Okay, so a very, very comprehensive study looking at success from multiple dimensions. And now to the big bang. Okay, what did they actually found as the number one predictor consistently correlated with sales performance? So it's adaptive selling. Adaptive selling, that's our number one predictor that we're going to really drill down into today. So what is adaptive selling? So the definition is the altering of selling behaviors during a customer interaction or across customer interactions based on perceived information about the nature of the selling situation. Okay? Makes sense, right? It's not surprising that this will predict. You can think about it as being a chameleon, okay, like the nice one that we have here, our sales chameleon. But instead of changing colors, what successful salespeople do is to adjust their approach based on each unique customer interaction. Okay, it's not just about being flexible. It's about reading situations and making really intelligent adjustments. So this is what we're going to drill down into today. So from this moment on, basically, we're going to have a really deep understanding of what adaptive selling means, what are the different components of adaptive selling, and how can you actually assess those different components in your sales in interviews. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's start with the first component. The first component of adaptive selling is customer cue recognition. Okay, we are people. We're meeting with people, and they give us a lot of signs, verbal, non-verbal signals that we need to decipher. That ability to read those signs, to understand the customer's communication style, their decision-making style, their buying signals, their resistance signals, is the first step towards adapting our approach. So what we're going to do now is to really understand how can we assess that in an interview. But because, again, there is a lot of wisdom here, and I want us to also learn from each other. So I also want to ask you guys, is this something that you're currently assessing in your interview process, customer cue recognition? If you do, please share with us, how do you currently do that? And now let's dive into our recommendation. So the way that we suggest to assess adaptive selling in general, but also the customer cue recognition in specific, is with role play. So in that role play, the candidate is, of course, the seller selling the company's core product or any other well-known product that they are able to sell. And what you need to do is to provide them with preparation materials for the interview. So beforehand, give them information about the prospect, the company, some basic information about the need, okay, so they can prepare. And then once you're in the role play, then you as a client, as a customer, you're starting fully engaged in the conversation. The first thing that we want to see that they're able to read is both verbal and non-verbal signs. So after a few minutes, you can start showing some time pressure, like checking your watch, like mentioning that you have another meeting. Of course, we want to see that they're able to recognize that pressure and to adjust their pace accordingly. Do they move to wrap up? Do they go to the bottom lines? Do they make sure that they schedule another meeting? Okay, so that's the verbal and nonverbal signals. Then another thing we want them to be able to identify is communication style signal. So you let the candidate start their pitch, they start selling to you, and then whatever direction they take, you take the opposite direction. Meaning, if they're speaking to you high level about business value, strategic value, then you go into the details, you drill down. And vice versa, if they're being technical and specific, you pull them out. Okay, and what you want to see here is, do they recognize and smoothly shift their level of detail? Then, okay, another signal that we want to look for is decision-making signals. So usually, right, there isn't just one decision maker, there are multiple. So you want to drop a hint about needing to check with others. And what you want to see is, do they adapt their closing approach? Do they drill down into who are those others? When should they be engaged within the process? What's their role within the process, etc. Okay, so to wrap up the first component, customer key recognition, we want to watch for three things. The speed of recognition, okay, that they are able to quickly pick up on your signals, and that they're able to adapt accordingly. So how appropriate and seamless and natural is their adaptation versus to someone that might have recognized but was not able to adjust, or they were able to adjust but it was a bit rigid, or it was a lot quite rigid. Okay, so before we move forward to the next component, we also want to offer simulation alternatives, because we understand that role play is not for everyone. We do recommend it because we do believe that putting candidates in real life situations and challenges is the most reflective method. It's not just, we believe there is a lot of data and science that shows that this is the most valid and predictive method. But still, if you feel that this is uncomfortable for you or for your candidate, here are some alternatives. Okay, so one option is to ask the candidate to pitch your product to different personas, persona A and persona B, that have different decision-making styles, communication styles, etc. These are just examples that we gave: a middle-aged woman and a teenager, but it can be whatever suits your product or service. Another option is, at the end of the interview, ask the candidate, based on the questions I asked you during the interview, how would you define my decision-making style? If you had to sell me our product, what approach would you take? Basically, this asks them to kind of summarize the clues that they've recognized with you, the interviewer. And also during the interview, eventually they need to sell themselves, right? So are they able to kind of analyze your patterns and your signals, and to say how would they actually sell to you? Okay, and now moving on to the second component of our of adaptive selling, which is strategy modification. So after we've recognized the clues coming from our prospects, now we want to adjust accordingly. Now, if you've paid attention, we've already covered the adjustment part, also when we've talked about the cue recognition. But now we're going to drill down even further into the part of our adjusting or modifying our strategy. So first of all, what do we mean by strategy modification? So it's adjusting the presentation style to match our customers' preferences, switching between different selling approaches, changing communication style and pace, and modifying our questioning techniques based on the customer responses. Okay, so that's kind of a comprehensive definition of strategy modification. Now, how do we actually assess this in interviews beyond what we've just said? So what we offer to do now is to create a sequence, a second part of the role play. Now, in that second part, the candidate is meeting with an additional stakeholder from the same organization. And now we want to really look into the adjustment. So the first thing that we'll do is to look at how do they adjust to different communication styles. Okay, so basically you as the prospect, you now need to choose an option, a role that you're playing. You can play a prospect that is very talkative and detailed versus someone that is ultra concise. And what you want to see in either case is the candidate able to adjust their communication style? So if you're very lengthy in your responses, you want to see that the candidate can actually politely guide the conversation to extract the key information they need from you. And if you're ultra concise, so you want the candidate to be able to ask effective follow-up questions and to draw the necessary information from you. Another part of adjustment is overcoming resistance, right? That's something that we always meet in sales conversations. So how do you overcome? And sometimes it's not that obvious, right? Sometimes it's kind of really behind the scenes. So what we want to see is that they are able to overcome and adjust. So you as the prospect, you can kind of embed sayings like, I don't know, I'm not sure, I suppose this could be helpful. But also your body language could seem like closed, hesitant. And when they speak about next steps, you provide vague responses. And here, what you want to see is first, are they able to recognize and translate your signals to resistance? Or do they just kind of, go with the flow and kind of skip this? If they've identified it, so can they actually address it effectively? So will they ask discovery questions to uncover the concerns behind your hesitation? Okay. Okay. And another part of adjustment is actually adjusting according to new information. So here, again, your role as the prospect is to provide new information. So you can drop hints about different priorities. You have different priorities or different pain points from the first stakeholder. You can present new challenges in the implementation, like different technical requirements, privacy requirements, etc., etc. And what you want to look for here is, do they effectively modify their value proposition based on the new information that you've provided? Okay, so this is the role play part for strategy modification. Also here, I want to stop and ask, before we'll go into the simulation alternatives, is this something that you're actually accounting for currently in your interview process? Are you assessing? Doesn't matter the name, you don't have to call it strategy modification, but are you looking at this in your interview process? If so, we would love to learn how. How do you actually go about that? Now going into simulation alternatives for strategy modification. So here you can ask the candidate about two different prospects from the same company who had very different personalities or priorities or communication styles, and to ask them to present or analyze the core differences and how did you navigate them? That's one option. Another option is to ask them to tell you about a subtle resistance that they've identified during the selling process. What did they do about it and what was the result? Or kind of flip it on its head and ask them to tell you about a time where they failed to identify a resistance and why. Why did they miss it? What exactly did they miss? And what would they do different today? Because what we want to see here that they haven't missed something that is pretty obvious, that they should have caught up. And even if it happened that they were able to learn their lessons and change and implement those lessons in their following deals. Another third option is to ask them to tell you about a time when they discovered new information in later stages of a deal, and that completely changed the situation. And again, ask them what did they do and what was the result. Okay, so that was strategy modification. Now we have two more components, which is going to be based on the previous and are going to be more quicker and concise. I do want to mention that in about 5 minutes, we will go to our Q&A. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Okay, so the third component, information integration. So a deal, a sales process is like a puzzle. You get bits and bytes of information from different prospects, different stakeholders, from the same stakeholder within the same conversation, between conversation. And what you need to do is to continuously collect and process the information in real time, and also to use your past experience to inform current interactions, exactly like in the example that we've just shared before. So how can we actually assess that? So based on the same role play, we're not adding more components now. Based on the same role play, the two role plays that we did by now, what we want to actually see is we want to watch specifically for moments where they connect pieces of information that weren't explicitly connected for them. So if you, as the prospect, said something early in the conversation about a priority or a pain, and then you've mentioned another priority or a pain, they are able to tie everything up in the way that they represent the value proposition of the product, the features that they're focusing on, etc., etc. Okay, we want to see if they document. It could be also mental documentation. They don't need to physically write it down, but do they document and reference multiple data points or information, things that you've actually shared throughout the conversation? And if, again, you want a simulation alternative, again, you can ask at the end of the interview. So based on this interview, what do you now understand about the position that you didn't before? Because the entire interview presented different questions and challenges that should have made the candidate have a much better understanding about the components of the role, the expectations from them, what success would look like. So you want to see that they were able to actually process this in real time and now tell you something new that they've learned about the position. In terms of using past experience to inform current interactions, then you can look at if the candidate was able to incorporate learnings from the first call to the second call. Do they treat them as completely separate conversations, or do they actually able to integrate information from both calls? And again, as a simulation alternative, you can ask, tell me about 2 or 3 meaningful lessons that you've learned through sales calls, meetings, processes, and how do you apply them today? What you want to see here is significant lessons that led to tangible behavioral changes in methodology, in tactics, in strategy, and not just kind of high level or surface level adjustments. Okay, and now to our fourth and final component, which is a solution customization. Solution customization is the ability to tailor the product or service presentation and offering to the specific needs and context. Um, and and also, of course, adjusting according to the customer stakeholder priorities. So here, what you can look at, again, based on all of the information that we already have, is how well did they prepare for the first call in terms of customized messaging for that specific prospect and company. If you gave them a lot of material, were they able to extract the real key information, to ask follow-up questions, and to really customize to the need of the organization and the prospect? Again, did they adjust their approach from in the second call? This time, according to the needs and the priorities of the second stakeholder, that I remind you was different from the first stakeholder. And simulation alternative, you can ask them, how do you prepare for a new prospect meeting? How do you prepare for a meeting with different stakeholders from the same company? Here, you need to pay attention not to ask them, how do they adjust? Because then it's leading the witness. It's telling them, I want you to tell me that you're actually adjusting. You only want to ask, how do they prepare? And what you expect is for them in the preparation also to include the customization part, the adjustment part. But don't tell them to tell you how did they adjust, because then they will tell you they adjust even if they don't. Okay? So these are our four components of adaptive selling, the most important predictor. And now to your questions. So let me take a peek and see. Okay. So one question that I already see, there is a slight delay. So one question that I can see is, are there contexts where adaptive selling is not that important? It's a great question. And I would say that it's a great question in general, not just about adaptive selling, because basically what it asks is this a one size fits all, or in different contexts, different skills, motivations, and behaviors predict more or less? So yes, that's definitely true. The context does matter. But when it comes to adaptability, which is such an important skill in today's ever-changing world, and especially in the sales context, then I would say that in most cases, it will be a very important a skill to assess. You know, if your product is selling them itself and people are just continuously knocking on the door, then yes, it might be less important. But in most cases, this is not the case. Okay, I see questions here. So do you recommend panel interviews? Panel interviews are good. They can be good as long as two conditions. First, independent evaluations, meaning the fact that you're sitting in the same room or virtual room and assessing the same candidate doesn't mean that you have to assess together. It actually, the best practice is to assess independently. Each of you assesses, scores, documents separately, and only after you provide your scores, recommendations separately, then you convene, because otherwise you are creating bias and you're thinking as one mind, one brain instead of multiple. And also, don't have too many people in the room, because that might be stressful. And above a certain limit of, I would say, 3, it doesn't really add more information. So candidate experience is also crucial in that sense. I was asked if I can please share these slides. So you will get a cheat sheet containing all of this information after the webinar. Okay, great. Other questions that I see here. What other competencies have you found signal on when running these role play scenarios? What else beyond adaptive selling do you usually learn about the candidate? Okay, great question, Blake. There is actually tons of both science and also our data from our clients. And actually, each one of our sessions will be focused on assessing a key predictive skill. So you can, like, we also post a lot about it on our company page, which I hope all of you are following. But also each session will be dedicated to each of these skills. But there are several core skills and motivations that need to be assessed. What number size do you recommend for panel interviews? So like I said, I wouldn't do more than 3 people. I think then it gets crowded and hurts the candidate experience, and also doesn't necessarily add more value. And okay, great questions here today. What applications of AI can you suggest in the process? So basically, everything, whatever AI you're using, of course, you know, we have an interview intelligence platform that brings AI in order to provide interviewers with guidance on asking skills-based questions and making data-driven decisions, and also providing them feedback about their biases and also the things that they're doing well to continuously improve. So, of course, that's an application of AI. But no matter what AI you're using, you should use it in a nutshell, I'm saying here, but we'll have separate sessions on those things, ethically and critically, making sure that it doesn't just replicate the biases that are already existing in your team. Okay, one last question from Kai. Other than observing the role play, are there tools to keep track and aggregate the interviewer's observations about the particular interview to use for individual feedback and to continue learning and adapting the role plays? Definitely, that's exactly what our tool does. Thank you, Kai. And if you learn more, of course, feel free to reach out to us. Okay, so our time has run out. You are a very curious audience, and I'm so happy and thankful for that. So thanks so much for joining us today. We really hope that we were able to teach you one thing or two about assessing adaptive selling. Even if you implement just 1 or 2 tips from what we've shared here today, you're already well on your way to hiring better sales talent. So like I said, please make sure you follow Informed Decisions on LinkedIn for more content on how to hire sales winners. And also stay tuned for the date and time of our next session, which will focus on assessing true customer orientation. As to Blake's question, what else predicts? So customer orientation is the second predictor in the research that we've shared. And we're going to really drill down into how do you assess, how do you actually know if this person is truly customer oriented or commission oriented. So we hope to see you on our next session. Thanks so much for being here today. Take care.